Are you recording with the OBS, by the way?
Why would it?
What do you got? Okay.
Guys, so this is a quick recap for the skull anatomy. So basically in this PDF, I've completed everything you need to know. And my eyes were like a radar when I saw what the professor presents and everything. So don't worry, I'm sure 100% that I didn't miss anything. So let's get started. A to Z. Now from the A. So we're going to start with the skull divisions. So basically, the skull is divided by two parts. So the neurocranium and the visceral cranium. What is the neurocranium? Neurocranium basically is the cranial cavity that lodges and houses the central nervous system. So the brain mostly, and its coverings, the meninges, and the starting, the origins, the approximations of the cranial nerves, and some models of vessels, and basically also some so vessels and arteries. Veins, so you see also the sinuses in the occipital bone, and so on. So for the visceral cranium, viscera means that it remains for an organ. So they also say the organs. So those organs are covered by some body cavities. We have seen in the before previously in the GIT tract. You see in the previous lecture. So here we talk about actually the organ. So in the visceral what are we involved with is the facial bones. So mostly the facial bones are here in this picture that I've uploaded for you. So you have the parrot bone. I'm gonna name them all. You have the nasal bone, the maxillary. So the maxilla, each maxilla is combined. Is combined between the shooter and the maxillary shooter. Hold on, I'm gonna use my pen. All right. Yeah. So here is the shooter, maxillary shooter. Okay. Also, you have the zygomatic bones. You have the lacrimal bones. Here in this picture, you have the inferior nasal concha, and also, so for the facial bones, where you cannot see in this cranium is the palatine bone, which is the paired one. And for those that are not paired, it is the vomer bone and the mandible. Because you have seen in the embryology, the embryology lectures, that in the previous in the fetal life, the mandible is actually from the first lecture, of course. You have seen the mandible is two per bone in the fetal life, and it will fuse together into the center in the metal protuberance, and the suture between the two parts of the mandible will turn from cartilaginous to a mineralized bone. So that's why we call the mandible bone a impaired bone, so one bone. All right. So here I'm gonna name you also the neurocranium. I don't forget about it. Don't worry. So this line is what we call the line for the calvaria. Okay, this red line. The calvaria is the neurocranium. The neurocranium, as I've told you, it covers the brain. So the main bones of the neurocranium are the frontal, the paired bone of parietal, the temporal, you have the occipital, right? And we're gonna see further on how the which sutures are between those bones and so on. All right. Now, I've done to you a cranial nerve recap. So yes, guys, you need to know the exactly by order the cranial nerve by itself. So the cranial nerve one is the olfactory nerve. It helps with the sense of smelling and everything. So yeah. So basically, it's a sensory nerve. The cranial nerve two, the optic one or the ophthalmic, if you want to say, if you want to call it, it's a sensory nerve. It's for sight. The cranial nerve 3 is the oculomotor. The oculomotor, oculo means for the eye. Motor, it's a motor nerve. So basically, from the name of this nerve, you know that it is responsible. Its function it belongs to the motoration, the innervation of the muscles, that the upper lid, the extraocular muscle, and the pupillary muscle. The cranial nerve for the trochlear one, it also is involved in the control, so the innervation, the motor innervation of the extraocular muscle. You're gonna see further on where it's located in the orbit in this lecture. The cranial nerve 5 is a mixed nerve, right? And it has 3 branches, all right? So when I call it a mixed nerve, it means that it has a sensory innervation and a motor innervation for the face. I have a trick to show you also. I'm just going to turn on my camera because I've still showed the others. All right, you can see me, right? Yeah? Anybody can
Yeah.
please?
Hi.
Okay, hi guys. So I'm going to show you a trick for that I've learned before for the nerves that are mixed. All right. So basically, the trigeminal nerve has 3 branches, right? How can we collocate them? Just like that, right? So the first branch is 5/8 ophthalmic. The second one is maxillary. You see my index is on the maxillary sinuses. You can see. And my middle finger belongs to my mandible. So 5C mandibular. All right? So this is for the this is for cranial 5 trigeminal. Cranial nerve 6, the adjacent, is a motor nerve, and it belongs also for the muscle movements of the eyeball. Cranial nerve 7, the facial one. As the cranial nerve 5, the trigeminal, it is a mixed nerve also. So means that it has a sensory innervation and also a motor innervation. And as the cranial nerve 5, it has 3 branches. So 7A, 7B, and 7C. Or you can call them also 7-1, 7-2, 7-3, which are the ophthalmic branch, the maxillary branch, and the mandibular branch. Cranial nerve 8, the vestibulocochlear. It's a sensory nerve and it belongs to the hearing and the balance. So, what I mean by the orthostatism of the body, so I mean by this word, we have seen it in physiology, means that you're for the equilibrium of your body. So, when you're standing up, when you're trying to maintain your equilibrium, your balance, and everything. I don't know if I have heard before when we have said that how can I say it? That the sense of the equilibrium is located in the ear. So yes, actually it's located in the ear. So for the the hearing, it belongs to the vestibulocochlear functions. Cranial nerve 9, the glossopharyngeal. It innervates the muscles that are involved in swallowing and tasting. So cranial nerve 10, the most popular one that I have seen in the beginning of this semester, the vagus nerve, it begins to the guts, the GIT, so the gastrointestinal tract, the heart, and the lungs. All right? And for the cranial nerve 11, the accessory, or we call it also the spinal accessory, it belongs to the sternocleidomastoid muscle and the trapezius muscle. So for the control of these muscles, the cranial nerve 12, so the last one, is the famous hypoglossal muscle that we have seen. It innervates the muscle of the tongue, as you may have seen also in embryology in the lecture of the development of the tongue. All right, and as a good leader, as a good, well-hearted leader, I've uploaded for you some mnemonics to help you remember the cranial nerves for the exam. So for this practical exam and for the final exam. So the first mnemonic is only one of the 2 athletes felt very good, victorious, and healthy. Only belongs to olfactory. 1 opt of oculomotor. D. Trochlear. 2. Trigeminal, atlases, abducens, felt, facial, very, vestibulocochlear, good glossopharyngeal, victorious vagus, and accessory healthy hypoglossal. And the other one is, once one takes the anatomy final, very good vacations start happening. Olfactory, once optic, one oculomotor, takes trochlear, the trigeminal, anatomy, abducens, final, facial, very vestibulocochlear, good, glossopharyngeal, vacations, vagus, start, spinal accessory, happening, hypoglossal. All right, and in this slide, you can see you have the whole location of every cranial nerve, right? Hold on a second. All right. So yeah, you have the location of every nerve. Yes, you need it to the exam because basically I have seen. I swear. Oh, I swear, really. I swear. I have seen from the professor that has uploaded some pictures where you have to locate each nerve by itself, not like the whole nerves, but in the inferior cranial fossa, there are some nerves that you have located near the magnum of the occipital bone and the clavus. You're gonna have to see the picture further on. All right. So here, as you can see, we are located in the endobasis of the cranium. So what I have done this week is that we have removed a part of the calvaria. So you can see that the frontal squama is not here anymore. So the superior one, yes. The parietal bone is not here, and the first part, the superior part of the occipital bone is not here anymore. So we are inside the skull. So the endobase. Let's start. Let's give a try to the anterior cranial fossa. In the anterior cranial fossa, we have our famous frontal bone, and as you can see in here, we have something called the cribriform plate. And the cristagalli, it's quite clear in here. So the cribriform plate and the cristagalli belongs to the ethmoidal bone. And in the cribriform plate, you have the passage of the olfactory nerve, so the cranial nerve 1, all right? Because in the further on in this lecture, we can see that you're gonna see the plate belongs to the nasal cavity. Okay, so as I have told you, olfactory nerves, its function is the sense of smelling, right? So, um, hold on. Too many people connected, quality is worse than what a blind man could see right now. Um, can you see? Can you see quietly the PDF, or is it too blurry for you guys? Can someone tell me? No.
I don't know if it's just from my computer, but it keeps disconnecting.
Oh, sorry.
It's a little blurry, but it's okay, I think.
Well, but at least like you have the PDF, so I think it's quite okay. Like you have the PDF if you wanted to look after which structure I'm talking about or something. Okay, at least.
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay, so now for the as we were talking about the anterior cranial fossa, so I was talking about the olfactory nerves, the cranial one, the one that belongs to the sense of smelling. We're gonna see further on the nasal cavity and the so on, yeah. Here you can see our famous bone, the sphenoid bone, right? So here you have you can see here like this kind of cellular structure. It is the sella turcica, right? And in the posterior part of the sella turcica, this I guess. Yeah. So in the interior part of the cell, the posterior part of the cella turcica, it is the dorsum celli. So let's get let's get started further on. So first thing first, In the superior part of the sphenical of the bone, you can see you have the optic canal, so the passage for the optic nerve, which is the cranial nerve 2, and the optic artery also. And inferior to, so above the optic canal, you have the superior orbital fissure. In the superior orbital fissure, you have the oculomotor cranial nerve 3, so cranial nerve 3, cranial nerve 4, the first branch of the trigeminal nerve, and you have also included the lacrimal, the frontal nasal ciliary nerves, and so on, and the abducens nerve, which is cranial nerve 6. So 3, 4, 5, 1, 6 for the superior orbital fissure. All right. Now let's move on into another foramina that is on the another famous sphenoid bone, the foramen rotundum. The foramen rotundum it allows the passage of the maxillary nerve, so the branch of the second branch of the trigeminal nerve, so 5B or 5-2 as you can call it, whatever. So the branch of the maxillary, the maxillary branch of the trigeminal nerve. And here we have the biggest foramina in the sphenoidal bone, which is the foramen ovale. In the foramen ovale, you have the bundles that the bundles of the bundles the main after 5-2 you have 5-3, so the mandibular branch of the trigeminal nerve and the meningeal artery passage through it. Right above the foramen ovale, you have the foramen spinosum. So spinosum, you have the middle meningeal artery and the third branch of the trigeminal nerve, which is the mandibular nerve. So on. Here, between the parts of the sphenoid and the basilar part of the occipital bone, you can see we have what we call the foramen lacerum. In the foramen lacerum, you have the location of the internal carotid artery, so the ICA. Now we have done the ICF, so the anterior cranial fossa, the middle cranial fossa and the sphenoid, and now here in the occipital bone, our famous occipital bone, so the inferior cranial fossa, you have the biggest foramina in our cranium, which is the foramen magnum, and we have also some locations of the other foramina, which is here. You have the jugular foramina and the hypoglossal canal in here, and also, as you can remember, what Professor said, that we have a fissure for the jugular, not a fissure, I think, a jugular fossa, right? So the jugular foramina allows the passages of the internal jugular vein first thing first, the glossopharyngeal nerve, so cranial nerve 9, the vagus nerve, cranial nerve 10, and the spinal accessory nerve, cranial nerve 11. So 9, 10, 11 for jugular foramina, plus the sigmoid inferior petrosal sinus, and the internal jugular vein. I'm going to repeat. The jugular foramina allows the passage for the sigmoid and inferior petrosal sinus, for the internal jugular vein, and the cranial nerve that are the 9, the 10, and the 11. So glossopharyngeal cranial nerve, the vagus nerve, and the hypoglossal accessory nerve, and so for, as you can see here, in posterior meningeal artery. Now for the hypoglossal canal, which is located here, you can see that it is lateral to our famous foramen magnum. Okay, so the hypoglossal canal belongs to the hypoglossal nerve, so the cranial nerve 12. And as you can see here, we have the internal acoustic meatus. In the internal acoustic meatus, you have the passage of the facial nerve, the cranial nerve 7, and you can and this meatus will allow also the passage of the vestibulocochlear nerve, so the cranial nerve 8. All right. This is for this is a whole recap for the foraminas. and the bundles content, so the vessels and the nerves, the cranial nerves especially. All right. So moving on, I have seen this picture lately on, and this is an interesting one. So you have in here in this part you have the endobasis of the cranium, and here the exobasis. This is like a treasure, digging treasure for your final and practical exam of anatomy. So I have talked about this part, all right? So the endobasis in the previous slide. And now for the exobasis, if I had to add something, is the incisive canal, which allows the passage of the nasopalatal nerve and the nasopalatal artery. Also, the most important, the petrosal part of the temporal bone, which is quite complicated, of course, like because we had it lately. That it is the last topic we have talked about with our professor. All right. So you have to pay attention for the jugular foramina, the location of it, the carotid canal. So you have to distinguish between them. Here you can see you have the styloid mastoid process in here, which belongs to the temporal bone. Also, if I had to add something, yeah, I think that's it. And also, pay attention really well. I think this could be a question also for the exam. Our professor have talked about the foramen magnum content. So basically, at 4, you can see the spinal cord, right? And here laterally to in the superior part of the spinal cord, you have the vertebral arteries, right? And in 5 you have the accessory nerve, the spinal accessory nerve. But like for the spinal vein, you're not going to be asked about, and neither also the posterior spinal artery. So basically, if the professor were to talk about the contents of the foramen magnum, so the bundles you can find in it, it will be only about the artery, the vertebral artery, the accessory nerve. Okay, so the cranial nerve 11, and the yeah, I think that's it. So, also I forgot to tell you about the condyle, the occipital condyle in here. Yeah, you can see here the kind of cartilaginous cartilaginous tissue for the articulation of the atlas to the head. Okay, so the vertebral the cervical the cervical vertebra number 1 atlas, and the second one is the axis. We're going to this is also the same pictures. So here I upload also the picture for the inferior for cranial fossa. It will be very helpful for tomorrow and for the final exam also. You have the part of the in the basilar part of the occipital bone, the clevius, and you have to pay attention, please, to the sinuses, the passage of the sinuses. So you have the inferior petrosal sinus groove, here, between the temporal bone and the occipital, the lateral basilar occipital part of the occipital bone, you have the inferior petrosal sinus groove. In here, you have the transverse sinus, the groove transverse sinus, sorry. And what else? The protuberance, internal occipital crest. I think you know it. You know it also. What else? I think that's it. I've already talked about the hypoglossal canal. Yeah. So here's a quick recap for the facial bones. So for the viscerocranium, as I've told you, so you have the nasal bone, it's a paired bone. The lacrimal bone, also paired one. Zygomatic bone, paired. Inferior nasal concha, paired one. Maxilla, so for the maxillary, paired also. Pay attention that 2 maxilla makes 1 maxillary. Okay. and that between the two maxilla you have the intermaxillary shooter, right? And for the impaired bone, it is the vomer and the mandible, right? And in the facial cranium, what you cannot see is the palatine bone, which when you open your mouth, you can see that like it is like how can I say it? Posterior to your heart palate. Okay, it is the palatine bone. All right. Yeah. Also here, also a quick recap for the anterior view of the cranium and the visceral cranium. So the frontal bone between the two arcades of our eyebrows, all right, you have what we call it the glabella, all right. Superior to the orbit here, the orbit cavity, you have a foramina. So a foramina that is superior to an orbit is what we call the supraorbital foramina. All right, you have some many others foramina. Here in the zygomatic bone, so the bones of our cheek, there is a foramina also. Please do not forget about it. Please, please, please. The professor talked about also. It is the zygomatical facial foramina. All right. Also, on the maxillary bone, so on the maxillary plate of the orbital, you have also a location of an orbit, of a foramina. So a foramina that is inferior to the orbit, it is what I call it an infraorbital foramina. Right? Don't forget about the frontal process. Right? What else? What else? What else, my dear friends? I have also some CT scans for the nasal cavity. All right, also for the mental foramina for the mandible, and I think that's it. But for the nasal cavity, there's also pictures I'm going to talk about more further on. Let's see. And for the orbit also, don't worry, guys. Yeah, so here we have a interior view of the visceral cranium, all right? Okay. So basically, you cannot see. I mean, you can see quietly here. You have the it's supposed to appear here the crystal galley, like we are in a distal part, in a more distal part than in the more distal part from the previous interview that we are supposed to see. All right. So you have the frontal frontal plate, the orbital process of the frontal bone, right? Here you have the temporal fossa, the zygomatic bone, okay, and the junction between the zygomatic bone and the maxillary bone. And as you can see, we have a great picture of these my famous sinuses, right? So let's talk about these sinuses. The biggest sinuses that you can see in front of here are those that belongs to the maxillary sinus, right? You have also for the ethmoidal bone in the pyramidal. How can I say? Pyramidal. No, sorry. Labyrinth. The ethmoidal labyrinth. Here we cannot see the frontal sinuses because we are further, like we are so far away from the frontal sinuses. So basically, we are like in further posterior part of the anterior view of the cranium. Okay, so basically, the exam, I think you're supposed to see basically the frontal sinuses in front of you. Here you can see quietly from the nasal cavity the concha. So, hold on. Yes. So, right superiorly to the palatine process. All right, you have the inferior nasal concha. Superior to the inferior nasal concha, you have the medial nasal concha, and basically you're supposed to see also the superior nasal concha, but it really depends on the CT scan that you can see in the exam. But mostly where most present in the CT scans are the inferior nasal concha and the middle nasal concha. All right. So here you have a great picture of the vomer also. As you can see, this CT scan of this patient, the patient has its septum like deviated. It's totally normal because as our professor said that the septum mostly are like not that perpendicular. Okay, most of the septum that the human beings are deviated, so it's quite normal. Okay, it's not dramatic or anything. And that's why mostly girls go to rhinoplasties for the deviated septum, but actually it's kind of normal. It's natural, so you don't have to worry about it. Quite fun. Yeah. All right. Here, the picture is not that clear for some of the teeth. But like, you have some molars here showing off, but it's not that quite important right now. You have the initial process, and I just want to clarify something also. Let me just check on my notes. Yeah. Here, there's not quite picture also, but like in the exam also you're supposed to see also the lamina papyracea, which belongs also to the labyrinth, the ethmoidal labyrinth. So in the exam, if you see the ethmoidal labyrinth, the right answer is the lamina papyracea. Also, between the maxillary bone and the inferior canal, inferior nasal concha, there is we call it also the ethmoid infundibulum. I think that's it for this picture. Yeah. Here you have a quite good picture of the sinuses. Okay, so they're highlighted. So you have the ethmoidal sinuses of the aircraft cells, so the pneumatic parts of the ethmoid, and those that belongs to the maxillary bone, aka the maxillary sinuses. Notice also, please do not confuse between this thing. I've seen so much of you that were confusing between turbinates and concha. Concha equal turbinate. Okay. Either if you say nasal turbinate or nasal concha, it doesn't matter. It's the same thing. Okay. It doesn't have any differences. A turbinate is a concha, right? Printed into your brains, guys. I don't know. Let me check. Is there anything else? The neurocranium. Okay. Here, in this picture from the atlas, I wanted to talk about the shooters, right? So let me just start with this picture. Actually, in the superior part, in the superior view of the cranium, so you can see you have a great view of the frontal bone, the parietal bones, and a little bit of the occipital bone. Between the frontal bone and the parietal bone, we call it the coronal shooter. Okay, so the coronal means crown. Okay, in French, couronne. That's it. So coronal shooter means that this is the crown of the head, the crowning shooter. Okay, between the two parietal bones, you have the sagittal shooter. All right. And between the parietal bone, between the two parietal bones and the occipital, you have the lambda shooter. And pay attention also, the end point between each shooter. So for example, the end point between the coronal shooter in here and the sagittal shooter in the anterior part, you have this point is called the bregma. It's something Greek. I forgot about it. I'm sorry. I'm not perfect. And the end point between the lambdoid shooter and the sagittal shooter, so the posterior part of the cranial superior view, it is the lambda. Why lambda? Because it's the Greek letter lambda. It is like a Y but inverted, okay? So it has the shape of a lambda, all right? So let me get back to this view. So in a lateral view of our cranium, pay attention to a small bone. They call it the Vermian bone. So it is also called the sutural bone. All right. In case you're getting asked, I think most of you have already drawn this picture. Okay. So as I've said to you, between the two parietal bones, so between the sagittal shooter and the coronal shooter, you have the bregma, and between the occipital, so the lambdoid shooter and the sagittal shooter, and then posterior part you have the lambda. And to pay attention, please, now that we are in the lateral view, you have also shooters between the temporal bones and the parietal. Between the temporal bones and the parietal, we have the shooter, the mastoid shooter. All right, and so in here, in the end point in the lateral view is between the temporal bone, so the temporal squama, and the parietal bone, also the frontal, the lateral part of the frontal bone, and the greater wing of the sphenoid. Okay, between them, the joint between them is what I called the pterion, Pterion. Okay, pterion. All right. The temporal bone is kind of complicated, quite complicated. So I have some good pictures also in the PDF. Also, don't worry. Let me check. All right, we already talked about the sphenoid bone. I have some cadaverous pictures in here also. What else? What else, my dear friends? You have it also there. I've already talked about the endobases and exobases. Yeah. Okay. Now we're going to start with the sorry. Now we're going to start with the frontal bone. All right. So here you have an inferior view of the frontal bone. All right. So NP belongs to the nasal part of the frontal bone. RE is the root of the ethmoidal cells of the pneumatics, the air crest cells of the ethmoidal bone. And you can see in here you have the orbital parts from the frontal bone. You have also in the middle, so the medial part of the frontal bone, between the two ethmoidal root cells, so ethmoidal neurical cells, sinuses, there's what we call a notch, right? So this notch belongs to the ethmoidal. So we call it the ethmoidal notch, right? You have a small fossa that is lateral to the orbital parts of the frontal bone. Okay, we have said already that in the orbit, in the lateral part of the frontal bone, superiorly, we had a fossa special for the lacrimal gland. So this fossa names is the lacrimal fossa. Laterally to the lacrimal fossa. Laterally to the lacrimal fossa. No, not laterally. Sorry. Superior laterally to the lacrimal fossa, you have the zygomatic process, right? And I think that's it for this one. Let me just check on the superior view of the frontal bone. You have the glabella in front of you. Here you have in supraorbital the supraorbital notch. Okay, and pay attention also, please. You have the passage of the trochlear nerve in here. So the trochlear you have under the superciliary arch, so SA in here, you have a notch belongs to the trochlear. Okay, hey, in the lateral part, I've told you before, this is the zygomatic process. You have the temporal line, the temporal surfaces. All right. And SN is the the supraorbital notch, I guess. Okay, and supraorbital foramina in here. Yeah, I guess. Okay, you have also the capish on the nasal spine. I think that's it in here. Let me check also the mandible. Okay, all right. For the mandible, it's not like I don't think the professor is going to talk about that much. Okay, but like as a quick recap in here, let's talk about the articulation. So the temporal mandibular joint, right? So and here you can see you have a notch. Okay, this is the mandibular notch. Okay, and further on, when you can go superiorly, you can see like you have the malahyoid groove, right? And you can see you have a small foramina that is lateral to the mental protuberance. It is the mental foramina, right? So I'm not going to talk about further on the mandible because yeah. Oh, okay. Now for the ethmoid bone. So you have the in front here. So this is an anterior view of the ethmoidal bone. You have the in front of plate. Okay, this is what I call the perpendicular plate, right? Sorry. Let me check also here. Yeah. So and you can see as here you have some like as we have said before that the ethmoidal is like is a pneumatic bone, right? So basically it has air crust cells in here. So the air crust cells are basically mostly located into the labyrinth. So here those small spaces in here are the belongs to the ethmoidal labyrinth. Here you have the part of the famous crista galli that you can mostly found in the interior cranial fossa. And the previous PDF, the previous slide that I've showed you. Here you have a great picture of the middle nasal concha. Yeah, here you have an posterior view of the ethmoidal bone, right? So you have the superior nasal concha, the middle nasal concha, the ethmoidal labyrinth, and the famous ethmoidal bulla that we're gonna get to see in the nasal cavity. The perpendicular plate. Please, please, please. I've seen so much people confusing this. Here in the inferior part, in the posterior part, the posterior view of the ethmoidal bone. This is not a nasal septum. Please. The nasal septum is cartilaginous, right? It's supposed to be transparent, okay? It's not bony. Your septum, guys, is not a bone. It's a cartilage. You can move it. You can move it with your fingers. I don't know. Okay? Please do not confuse between the nasal septum and the perpendicular plate. It's the last time I have said. Okay. Now for the superior view of the ethmoidal bone. You can see in here further on the perpendicular plate, the perpendicular plate in the superior part, and the ethmoidal labyrinth in the inferior part on the right, and inferolateral parts. Okay, you have here the orbital plates, OP. Okay, in the lateral part, CP is the cribriform plate, right? And some of the air crystals of the ethmoidal bone, so that belongs to the ethmoidal labyrinth. Yeah. So the part of the crista galli, and that's it for the ethmoidal bone. You are responsible to know all the components and the structures of the ethmoidal bone, the sphenoidal bone, and the frontal bone. Okay, believing that we're gonna have a lot of questions about them. All right. Now for the famous temporal bone. So basically, I know that some of you have been struggling with the temporal bone, but we're gonna go further on. So let's take it slowly. So in the lateral view of the temporal bone, you have the squamous part. All right. In here, you have the groove for the middle artery. So in GM, you can see you have a kind of a groove. It belongs to the middle temporal artery. All right. Here you have a crest in the how can I say it? In the posterior part of the posterior part of the temporal bone. All right. So this is the supramastoid crest. All right. What else, my dear friends? Okay. So basically, you have the zygomatic process, the zygomatic process of the temporal bone. Here you can see that you have a kind of a tubercle in here, right? So like it looks like a kind of a prominence. So the AT is the articular tubercle, all right, and you have a clear picture of the stellate process, so SP, all right, and the tympanic part of the temporal bone, so in TT, all right, and the external acoustic meatus EM, okay. Don't forget, please don't forget them. Now in the medial view, I saw the temporal squama, all right. What else we have to talk about for you? The stellate process SP it is already done. The cochlear, but you don't need it, I think. Okay, the internal acoustic meatus, it is done. GP is the hiatus of the greater petrosal nerve. The GS is it's a groove, okay? So it's a groove that belongs to the superior petrosal sinus that we have seen between the middle cranial fossa and the inferior cranial fossa. Also, you can see here in the anterosuperior part of the temporal bone, you can see MM, right? Here where I'm located. It is a groove, okay? This groove belongs to the middle meningeal artery. And here in ZP, this is the zygomatic process. And so on, I guess. Okay. Most importantly, the inferior view, I assume that it has been like a quite of a problem to most of you guys. I mean, yeah. So don't worry. So basically, an inferior view. So the superior part is the lateral. The inferior part is the medial, and your right is the anterior, and the left is the posterior. Okay, so let's start. ZP is the zygomatic process. All right. Here you have the articular tubercle. All right, in AT. Here you have a notch in the posterior part, in the inferior view of the temporal bone. MN, guys, is the notch, the mastoid notch, and MP is the mastoid process. So you have a notch and a process for the mastoid, MN and MP. All right. You have the stylomastoid foramina, so SY. And what else? I think CC is the carotid canal, if I'm not wrong. Also, TC tympanic. This is the pink tympanic part. What else I have to talk about for you? We have the Petrus part, of course, of temporal bone, so the TP. I don't know, GS. I think the jugular fossa. Yeah. I think that's it for the temporal bone. Okay. You don't have to pay attention that much for the superior view. Basically, if the professor want to ask you a question. You have for me, the sphenic bone is like a butterfly, okay? So you have the lesser wings, for me, the smallest wings, okay? Or you can, so the smallest wing, the greater wings that are the biggest, and you can see you have the lateral process, right? The lateral pterygoid plate and the medial pterygoid plate. Now, for the foramina, between the greater wing and the lesser wing, you have the superior orbital fissure. Now for the foramina on the greater wing, you have foramen rotundum, FR. Sorry, FR. I've said it in French. Sorry, guys. You have the foramen spinosum, but I don't think it's in here. Yeah. Let me just check for the other foramina. I'm trying to see a greater picture for you. So we have the foramen says foramen rotundum, superior forbidden fissure. Now, here you can see the foramen spinosum. Okay, so in FS, the foramen ovale, it is in here. This is actually like in the superior of the sphenoidal bone. All right. Here, sorry. What else? I guess you have also the foramen, the foramen lacerum. The foramen lacerum, I've told you, in between the middle cranial fossa and the inferior cranial fossa, it is located. So between the basilar part of the occipital bone and the greater wings, at the end of the greater wing in the inferior part of it, you can see the location of the foramen lacerum. And yeah, I think that's it for this one. I've already told you about the location of the cranial nerves, but here I just want you to pay attention for the location of the vertebral artery, because I think mostly maybe the professor is going to ask you of it. What else do you have to pay attention, guys? Okay, the location of the prechiasmatic, the optical chiasma. If you can see something like an X, okay, I'm just going to show you in my camera. Hold on. You can see me. I think you can see me, right?
Yeah.
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 So the optical chiasma, okay, it's like an X, all right? So it is in superior parts between the middle cranial fossa and the superior cranial fossa. It is like an X, okay? And here, you can see my hands, right? Those are the optic nerves, so the cranial nerve too, right? So believe me, tomorrow we're gonna have a question about it, okay? And let's go back to my previous PDF. So the optic nerve and the chiasma, all right? Now above the optic nerve, you have the ICA, the internal carotid artery. Okay, those bundles are lateral to the salla turcica. Okay, or the synovial bone. You have the basilar artery. You have to pay attention also for. I'm going after this lesson. I'm going to send you a picture those pictures that the professor have shown us. I have responded to the questions that the professor have uploaded to the Romanian module. I have responded to those questions, and I'm going to send you the answers after this. Also, you have to pay attention in the between the on the occipital bone. So the inferior cranial fossa. You have to pay attention to the position, to the location, of the trigeminal bone, the trigeminal nerve, the hypoglossal, the glossopharyngeal, and the vagus nerve, and so on. I'm going to upload the picture right after this lesson. Yeah. Also, believe me, right, that mostly the professor is going to ask you about the questions for the sinuses. So we have the sigmoid, the petrosal sigmoid sinus. Okay, so you have the superior petrosal sinus, the inferior petrosal sinus or the sigmoid sinus, the transverse sinus, and the falx cerebri or the straight sinus. I would say like the professor can ask you either straight sinus or falx cerebri, but yeah, he told you about the two main names for this sinus. What else? I think that's it. I'm going to upload the great picture that the professor have shown us on his Google Meet with the right answers. Don't worry. yeah, so this is the same. This is the same picture. Let me check. Is there something else? Yeah, this is the same picture. Now for the orbit. Moving on for the orbit, guys. So before we start with the glands, I'm going to talk about the bony parts of the orbit, of course. So, okay. So in green you have the frontal bone. So in the frontal bone you have the in the medial part. In the medial part of the orbital, you have the supraorbital notch. Okay, and directly medially to the supraorbital notch. Pay attention that the professor can ask you about the trochlear notch also. Okay, supraorbital notch. I think supraorbital notch. Yeah. So the trochlear notch is directly right down this small tubercle. You can see in here. I don't know. Can see the tubercle I'm talking about. I don't know if I can feel it. Hold on. Hold on. I just really want to show you this tubercle. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Basically, perfect. I can write in here. Basically, this is the trochlear notch. Okay. It is not in this picture. I'm sorry. Sorry, guys. Okay. Trochlear notch. Okay. What else? You have the lacrimal, the lacrimal fossa. So this whole part is the lacrimal fossa. Come on, please. My pen is like, okay. Don't buy Apple, guys. It's shit as fuck. Okay, lacrimal fossa. Sorry for my writing. Yes, I have the handwriting of a doctor. Thank you. I have the great view of the lesser wing of the sphenoidal bone. Here I have the optic canal, the maxillary part, the maxillary plate of the orbital of the orbit, the zygomatic process. Please. Sorry, guys. I'm trying to write in the iPad. Oh, okay. Just going to try. Okay, never mind. It's not working. I'm going to waste my time on this one. So, the light blue bone is the zygomatic bone. Okay. So, on the zygomatic bone, pay attention also to the zygomaticofacial foramina that I've told you about, and for also the fissures. So, in the superior part, you have in this L shape. You can see here on the the great wing of the sphenoid bone, you have an L-shaped fissure. Okay, so the vertical one is the superior orbital fissure. And the horizontal one, the inferior one, is the inferior orbital fissure. Here I have the fossa for the lacrimal sac and a crest, as you can see. It is the crest of the lacrimal, the posterior lacrimal crest. This crest, okay. What else I have to talk about? I think I've talked about. Oh yeah, I almost forgot to tell you for this part. So in yellow, it is the ethmoidal bone, okay, and above the yellow, you can above the ethmoidal bone, you can see you have two kind of foraminas. So the one that is the one that is near to the optic canal, it is the anterior ethmoidal foramina, and the one that's so far distal to the optic canal in here, so medial to the lacrimal part. Okay, it is the posterior ethmoidal. If I'm not wrong. Okay, sorry. I think I've confused them. Yeah, I've confused them. Sorry. So this is so in the medial part of the orbit, this foramina is the anterior ethmoidal foramina, and the one that is near the optic canal is the posterior ethmoidal foramina. That's it for the orbit. All right. Okay, moving on for the drainage of the tears. So here we have an anterior view of the lacrimal apparatus. of the eyes. So in the lateral part of the orbit, I've told you that we have a fossa, right? Sorry, you have a fossa. This fossa belongs to the lacrimal gland, right? And how can I say? So yeah, basically, the lacrimal gland will secrete the tears. So in the superolateral angle of the orbit, and will pass across the eyeball in here, right? And will enter the do we call it the lacrus lacrimalis? So the lacrimal lake, right? And the medial part of the medial angle of the eye, and from there it will drain through the lacrimal puncta and the lacrimal canalucci to this lacrimal sac in S in here, and the lacrimal sac will drain into the nasolacrimal duct in N, right, and will empty into the inferior meatus of the nose here in I. You can see, all right. So this is a quick recap for the lacrimal drainage of the tears and the mucus and so on. When you have your nose running, as the professor said. What else? Okay. I've talked about this. Let me check also. Okay. Here's a great picture, a great CT scan for the nasal cavity. So let me just check if there's something missing in here. I don't know. Who knows? I'm going to send you further on some pictures, some good pictures that I've seen before. So here you have between each concha, you have what we call the meatus. So right above the inferior nasal concha, the inferior nasal turbinate, you have the inferior meatus, and between the middle nasal turbinate or middle nasal concha and inferior nasal concha, you have the middle meatus. The cribriform plate belongs to the ethmoidal, as you may know. Okay, the lamina papyracea. Okay, it is close to the orbit. Okay, so it is between the orbit and the ethmoidal labyrinth, right? And I don't know if you have a good picture of the. Oh yeah. Also, okay, it's not showing in this picture, but you have something. You still remember the initial process, okay? Basically, it's supposed to be between the maxillary sinus and the orbital plate in here, right? So don't forget about the insinate process. I'm going to show you on WhatsApp further on what it is, of course, so that you have to, let's say, to not forget about it, right? The superior nasal concha, the superior nasal concha is not showing in here. So basically, in the CT scans, mostly it is the inferior nasal concha and the middle nasal concha that shows the most. What else? I've talked about the lamina papyracea, the cribriform plate, here, of course, the famous crista galli. I almost forget about it. We have the maxillary sinus in here, our biggest sinus in there. Here, don't confuse between the crista galli and the frontal sinus. Okay, the frontal sinus. Okay, first of all, the sinuses are supposed in a normal anatomy. Sinuses are supposed to be black, okay, because they are filled with air. There are air spaces. Because I've told you that most of the skull is composed of the phlegmatic bones or air crystals and so on. So sinuses are always supposed to be black. Okay, so do not confuse between the crista galli and the frontal septum of the frontal sinuses. Okay, so as I've told you, frontal sinuses are supposed to be black, and if it's not black, then it belongs to the crista galli. And this gray shape, okay, it is the frontal lobe of the brain. Okay, what else, my dear friends? I've told you about the ileocean process, the middle nasal concha, the inferior nasal concha, the maxillary sinus, the cribriform plate. I think that's it for the nasal concha. Okay. Here I have a lateral view and a coronal or superior view for the for the nasal cavities. You have the choana that is between the nasal cavity and the stomodium. Okay, so above the nasopharynx is what I call the choana. It's the communication between the nose and the stomodium, so the mouth, right? For the pharynx, it's it is separated into three parts. So the first part is the nasopharynx, the second part is the oropharynx, and the third part is the laryngopharynx. I think, yeah. Here, don't forget that the clevis belongs to the occipital bone. You have a great the sella turcica of the spindle bone that is showing creatine here. Some air crystals, some from sinuses. Oh yeah, the hiatus seminaris also at middle bulla. It's the biggest sinus also. What else? What else, my dear friends? Lamina papyracea, the nasal septum, and so on. Oh yeah. Okay, so for the nasolacrimal duct, so the passage of the through the nasolacrimal canal. What else? Yeah. So let's go back to the orbital, the okay. So here in this picture, I've extracted, I think, from the Grant anatomy. So you have the location of each bundle within the superior orbital fissure and the inferior orbital fissure. So and also on the optic canal. So first of all, let's start from the easiest to the hardest. In the optic canal, basically you have the optic bundle, so the optic nerve, the cranial nerve 2, and the ophthalmic artery. All right. Now for the inferior orbital fissure, you only have the inferior ophthalmic vein. Now for the superior orbital fissure, as long also you have a vein, which is if in the inferior orbital fissure it is the inferior ophthalmic vein, then in the superior orbital fissure it is the superior ophthalmic vein. Logically, right? So, and remember also, guys, that I've told you previously that we have the 5A, the first branch of the trigeminal nerve, which is a mixed nerve, the cranial nerve 5. It belongs to the it is the ophthalmic nerve. Okay, so you have two branches of it, and as I've told you also for the trochlear nerve. Okay, so basically I've told you about the trochlear fossa in here. Sorry, the trochlear notch. Right, don't forget about it, please. Thank you. Let me check. Okay, yeah. Also, the other nerve also. So the cranial nerve 6, the abducent nerve, the also some branches of the ophthalmic branch of the cranial nerve 5, and of course you have the inferior branch of the oculomotor nerve. So the nerves that belongs to the muscles and the movement of the eye. So the not the movement of the eye, but actually the eyelids and the extraocular muscle. All right. I think that's it for this one. I've already told you about the lacrimal gland, where is it located? Here we have also a greater picture of the orbit with the canals locations. Sorry, not the canals. The bundles, the nerves, and the arteries and the veins in the foramina, the fissures. Okay. Don't forget about the nasolacrimal gland, the nasolacrimal canal. Okay. Which is located medially to the orbit and into the between the lacrimal bone and the nasal bone. So that's why you call it the nasolacrimal canal. Let me check also something else. Oh, yeah. So all right. I see. Yeah. So that's it for this lesson. Yeah, you can stop recording, I guess. You good, guys? Hello.
Yeah.